Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by Michael Shapiro for the second time, and I'm delighted to be talking to him about his piece variations for solo violin. It's a theme and 18 variations on the traditional melody of Shalom Aleichem, and it's played by Tim Fain. I hope you enjoy our conversation. So welcome to Harmonious World once more. I'm delighted to be joined. Thank you, Michael, for joining me again after 4 or 5 months. And I'll be excited to hear about a couple of your other projects. But I'd like to start by talking about Piece Variations, which is this solo violin album performed by Tim Fain. When did you write the theme and variations?
First off, wonderful to be back, as it were, across the pond with you, Hilary, and on Harmonious World. I so enjoyed our last conversation. I wrote the piece variations when I got to know Tim Fain. Marge and I were in Moab, Utah, where we have a house, and there's a wonderful music festival there. And we were listening to a string quartet. Actually, I think it may have been Dvorak piano quintet. In any event, the first violinist, we both looked at each other and we said, who is this guy? This is about 16, 17, maybe even 18 years ago. He stood out so strongly. And then we got to know him. And that's before he really took off as a soloist. We invited him to be artist in residence with my orchestra, with the Chapek Orchestra. And he did about 4 or 5 concerti with me, including a wonderful recording of Schindler's List, which is on YouTube, which is extraordinary. It's the best Schindler's List performance of anyone. I've done it a few other times.
And it really is. I mean, that's a stunning piece anyway. But his
it's a stunning piece.
Yeah.
Oh, it outshines everyone. And it's me conducting, and that was a children's concert of all things, a John Williams children's concert, but we threw him in because we just love him so much. So we've done many concerti. And I wanted to write a solo piece for him. And since that solo piece of Piece Variations, I've written 2 other works for him, Sonata for Violin and Piano, and my most recent piece, which I finished just before the pandemic hit, At the Shore of the Sea, Concerto for Violin and Orchestra, which, God willing, will be premiered when the lights come on again all over the world, here in the States, in the UK, and in England, and in Europe. In any event, Piece Variations is based on a theme that is used in the synagogue, which talks all about peace, about the thing that we all seek, at least the ones of us who love life.
Indeed.
And isn't that what it's all about? If you've had good relationships with people over your lives, spouses, family, grandparents, stories, great engagements in houses of worship where it's all about love and not about anything else, and humanity and brotherhood and sisterhood, all the things that really count. Indeed, So I wrote this piece based on that very famous theme, which in Hebrew is called Shalom Aleichem, which is peace unto you. And that's the theme. But then there are 18 virtuoso variations, which I wrote for this great genius of the violin.
Yeah, and they are, aren't they? They're tricky, I can imagine.
But for him, it's like, as we say here, falling off a log.
Right.
Tim is not only famous for my music, but he has been all over the world as a duo with our friend Philip Glass. They play together.
Oh.
Tim, it's the Fain Glass duo, Glass Fain duo, however they call themselves, and they're all over YouTube.
Yeah.
And they do Philip's music. Tim is very famous also for playing the neat play number 2 from Philip's Einstein on the Beach. He plays it like nobody else. It's so well done. And that's a masterpiece as it is. I adore that piece of Philip's. And then, he also has done several movies. 3 of them won Oscars. The Black Swan, he is the featured violinist, and actually you can see him in a scene.
Oh, I didn't
and he
know
did
that.
12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight. He had 3 straight Oscar Oscar-winning movies. It's crazy.
Wow.
Violinist on all three. And in addition to that, he's composing more, and he's doing a lot of video things that are online. TimFain.com. It's an extraordinary player. And again, God willing, when we can go into theaters again, there are a number of wonderful orchestras here and also in Europe, in the UK, that hopefully will do the violin concerto that I wrote, At the Shore of the Sea, which is very symbolic, is it not? Isn't that
Absolutely.
where we are?
Yeah.
Aren't we at the shore of the sea right now?
Yeah. And we don't know when we're stepping off or stepping on or whatever it is. Yeah.
And, I feel like a prophet. I hate to call myself a prophet, Michael, but, I wrote this piece, finished it right before March of last year. So, but I had a sense, artists have a sense of a lot of things. And the plague that we're living through, the pestilence, has certainly changed a lot of people's attitudes. I hope it preserves itself in the new world, and when we don't get too mercantile and too obsessed. There's no harm in, in a good kind of capitalism, in my view. There's no harm to it. But the value system that artists seek, and that I certainly seek in my music, is quite important, I think, and edifying. And I also think it's something that we need to recognize as we go forward in our behavior. The one-on-one relationship is very important. And that's the way I feel about you, Hillary. We have a one-on-one relationship, which is wonderful at this point.
We do. And yet we've only spoken for, I don't know, an hour or something.
Yeah, but we can tell.
This. But isn't it interesting that I think I too hope that we can translate these online relationships that many of us have developed through lockdown in the last 12 months into real life relationships.
I will say one thing, if I can talk nationally. My dad was in the First Army during the Second World War. And I may have told you this story last time, I don't know, but it's worth repeating. He was at the River Meuse during the Battle of the Bulge in France, and I think it was in either France or Belgium, I'm not really sure. And he was with British soldiers. And he got very friendly with one and admired the British soldier's jacket. He says, oh mate, that's a Montgomery jacket. He said, my father said, that's wonderful. And the British soldier gave it to my father, the Montgomery jacket.
Wow.
It's just a little taste on a personal basis. When my grandfather fled the awfulness of religious persecution in Poland over 100 years ago, he stopped in London and spent a few years in London, where he became a devotee of the London Music Hall. And I have these most wonderful pictures of my grandfather in Edwardian dress, looking like a proper gentleman. There he is in London in 1905 or 6, whatever it was. And whenever I've been to the UK, I will tell you, I feel very much at home. And this is a wonderful thing, because I think our relationship of countries is totally unique. One of our jokes during the last presidency of someone whose name I shall never say again was that we were really hoping that we had a monarch back. It's like George III really didn't do a good thing, I don't think. Right. No, it's just a matter of ethics. I was in the chapel in Windsor about 3-4 years ago. No, actually, yes, I think it was 3-4 years ago when I conducted the CBSO in Birmingham, and we went to Windsor, and it was on the 4th of July, and we were in the chapel. It was very interesting. Independence Day,
Yeah.
We're in the chapel, and the docent heard my accent, and he says, "Are you a Yankee?" I said, I'm a Mets fan. I'm from New York. I'm not a Yankee fan." Because he started laughing. He says, "Look over there. You know who's buried there?" I said, "Oh, it's George III." He says, "It's Independence Day. Why don't you say hello?"
That's amazing.
We can joke about it now.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But can you imagine how we must have felt as the Brits on the 4th of July to hear about the insurrection? It must have been heartbreaking for the Brits because we felt that connection that
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's really good. I agree with you. I think there is nothing like the connection between Brits and Americans.
We all died in Europe, saving the world, World War II and One.
Yeah.
In my dad's generation, my grandfathers were both in the armies in World War One. I mean, it terrible business. But I so respect my father's generation for what they did and for the connection with England. So when I go there, and I have many friends, it's home too,
Yeah.
And we have this feeling. I have it in Canada, we have it in Australia. It's really something, and I think it's a wonderful legacy. If we don't talk about colonialism and all the things that were not good, certainly the positives and the actually as you mentioned last time when we were talking about literature,
right?
When we discussed My Archangel, which is based on John Milton's Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
There's a very strong connection between my art and the literary culture of the UK and Ireland and the United States, without question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Takes me to another subject, if I may go there.
Yes, of course. You carry on.
I'll carry on. Well, the thing is, when I was in my 20s, which is a little bit a while ago, I read a book called The Slave. And it was by a man who about 7 years later would become a Nobel Prize winner. His name is Isaac Bashevis Singer, who lived on 86th Street in New York City.
Right.
When I was a kid. I was so taken by this story, which takes place in 1650s Poland, of all places, because it seemed so present. It seems so now. And now in 2021, it seems even more present, and I'll tell you why. During the 1640s to 1650s, it was a time of pestilence in Europe, the plague. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
It was a time of xenophobia, of religious persecution. And above and around all of that, it is the story, a forbidden love story between a Roman Catholic Polish woman in her 20s and her father's slave, a religious Jewish man. Can you imagine? We're not talking 2021, a Christian-Jewish relationship, which is commonplace these days. We're talking 1652, in the middle of plague, violence, Swedish, Russian, Polish invasions, Cossack invasions. Epic. So this is an amazing story. So when I was 20 years old, I wrote to Isaac Bashevis Singer. How did I get to him? I looked him up in the phone book.
Brilliant.
It's crazy stuff. And everybody used a phone book in those days. So I looked him up in the phone book. There he was on 86th Street. I wrote to him, asking for permission to set The Slave as an opera. I was 20. And he was in 7 future years, he was going to become a Nobel Prize winner. This is before Barbara Streisand did the Yentl movie. And I got a response from him, signed by him. Dear Mr. Shapiro, thank you for your interest in my novel. You may even be a famous man, he wrote to me. Can you imagine? I don't know anything about opera, he said. And then Singer said, you should speak to Lila Karp, my representative at Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, the famous publishers. She can help you. Well, I wrote to her, and Paramount Pictures was interested, and this one was interested. And I wasn't able to get the rights. It took many, many years later, till right after during and after the pandemic, that I was able to sign a contract to get the rights to set it to an opera with the estate of Isaac Bashevis Singer. And then through various means, I started to work with Hannah McDermott, who is a wonderful, very young librettist and opera singer, turns out. She studied at Juilliard, but Hannah also read, as we say, read musicology, I believe, and English literature at Oxford, in your
Wow.
neck of the woods.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful poet, and she's got a great sense of the stage. So let's talk about the stage for a second.
Yeah.
I did not know you last time, but we had a wonderful conversation. At the end, we were like old friends. And hopefully we'll go see Frankenstein together.
Absolutely. I cannot wait for that.
I can't wait either to conduct it over there or to have somebody else do it again. All right. So when I first met you, my internal music and your internal music was formal. Okay.
Yeah.
This is thinking theatrically. By the end of that talk, my music and your music became more warm and reaching. You see where I'm going?
I see exactly where you're going. Yes.
Now, this conversation on Harmonious World today is obviously more harmonious and more melodious. It's no longer in a restrictive minor, but it's very much in major. What I'm trying to say to you, and it has a lot of rhythm in it, the music that we have today is a different kind of theatrical music than we had when we first met. So if I were there, I would walk towards you and there would be a music of optimism. Now, that's not always true in opera, you know. If people are on stage, we have to portray them to the audience, people sitting there. There are only a handful, and I can mention who they are, of opera composers in history that have fully understood this. Obviously, Monteverdi is starting out, but then Mozart over everyone, and Giuseppe Verdi, certainly. In Wagner, I'm not so sure that it is there, frankly. It is in certain ways. And what Wagner and Strauss do is that in the undercurrent of the orchestra, they often portray what's going on stage. Strauss, I think, is a little better at it, frankly, in moving people around. Benjamin Britten's another master in it. His subject matter, however, is sometimes so disturbing that I'm not so sure that I actually want to be involved in some of it, as great as it is.
Do you know what I have to say? Peter Grimes is one of my favorite all-time operas, and yet I find it so difficult to watch because of the subject matter and because of the way he treats it. It's so powerful. It's one of those, and I think you're right. I think that he does it in a different, you know, it's very different to Mozart. That's always feels very kind of sort of happy and light. I know it's not always, but you know what I mean? Whereas Britten always feels to me like it gets right in my heart.
I spent a day when I was at Juilliard with Peter Pears, actually.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And it was a great experience. Actually, Britten at that time was suffering and soon passed away in a ridiculously young age from his heart condition. But Pears was in New York to do Death in Venice. And I spent a day with him while he came to Juilliard, and we spent time. It was wonderful. I didn't speak to him about any of this, but I mean, in retrospect and looking at the Britten legacy, and I've been to Oldborough and I've been to the Red House, you know, and we stayed in Oldborough for a good number of days on the beach, right across the street literally from the bedroom window. I could look at a plaque on the building across, which stated that in this building he wrote Billy Budd,
right?
Which is also a very dark and disturbing opera.
Absolutely.
I'm going a little across.
Sorry, we got distracted then. Yeah.
And I've walked, by the way, in the fields in Oldborough where he walked.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is, there are very few people who have used the stage, and this is something I'm very sensitive to, and hopefully I'm one of the good ones, in getting into the mind of the character and then looking out at the people who are in the audience, and also the people in the drama. You know, to break the fourth wall, as it were. But the thing about Mozart that's so wonderful is that in the music of everyone, he's inside the character.
Right.
And he has the great joy of having Da Ponte in 3 of those operas as his librettist.
Yeah.
and then Schikaneder in that completely wild magic flute. Now, in those 4 operas, he was able to establish something that we all emulate. And in The Slave, when I portray the slave Jacob, I'm very much thinking of what is he thinking at that very moment in that setting? What is Wanda, who becomes Sarah in the second act, what is she thinking? This Roman Catholic girl who has to convert to be with her love and be a mute. I mean, it's an amazing epic story with violence and awful interpersonal relationships, but above it all is this kind of Romeo and Juliet thing going on.
Wow.
So this is what's occupying my time now. And I'll have Act 1 done by June, and then Act 2 by final act by December. So, looking for houses as we speak.
Wow. It sounds amazing. So you said it's a sort of Romeo and Juliet type story. Don't tell me the ending because I want to wait and, but
Got to be there.
how close are you being to Singer's book?
Well, it's an opera. Again, he wrote a novel. So it's a stage piece. The great news about Hannah McDermott is that she is a skilled dramaturg as well. And we worked with a wonderful woman by the name of Corey Ellison, who's a famous dramaturg here she works at Glyndebourne actually, to develop the drama. That's the first thing we did. Before I wrote a note, pretty much. We worked on the dramatic setting in every scene. Wow. So a novel can say where you are in the novel world, but it's very different when you have people on stage emoting in time, as it's watched. So it's quite the great question. It is the fundamental issue of all translated or transliterated novels into opera or theatrical pieces. It's just a milieu that I've grown up in, so it feels very natural and organic. And Hannah is, even though she's a young woman, she is very skilled and knowledgeable and sensitive completely to the issues facing the librettist in the circumstance. So, I will call her and say this word, that word, or she'll say that note, this rhythm. We go back and forth. And it's a wonderful colloquy between two people who really adore each other's work and are having fun.
Right. So Act 1 by June, Act 2 by kind of end of the year, and then find somewhere to put it on.
Well, we have a letter of intent from the Jerusalem Opera for 2023, and I have not yet come to the continent or to the UK to hawk it, as we say. There are some theaters here that are looking at it, and we put together actually a video, which I can send you.
I'd love to see that.
I'll send it to you. It's on Vimeo. Anyone can see it. It's on Vimeo or YouTube on my channel. And it's a trailer of 12 minutes with two wonderful singers, Megan Moore and Gregory Feldman, accompanied by Stephen Beck of the New York Philharmonic. Both of these singers are the most extraordinary young people, and Hannah and I are hoping we can get them assignments in the premiere or some other performances of this piece when it's staged. They are beautiful and they're young, and boy, are they dynamic. And you'll see.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait. That'd be amazing. Fantastic. So then, do you want to talk about the other composition that you've written for Tim Fain?
Yes, of course. At the Shore of the Sea, Concerto for Violin and Orchestra is a piece that will be performed here in the States and recorded, God willing, on Naxos Records. I can't tell you more specifics because that's the way this works here, but there are four conductors actually, very interested in the work and interested in Tim, and in the UK and in the continent working on that as well. So the piece is a traditional 3-movement violin concerto, but it's a violin concerto that I've written. And it's very different from Archangel, which, had this epic vision, really, very much tied to Paradise Lost. with the war between good and evil and so forth. This is very different. This is very personal, and it's very violinistic. Other than the title, At the Shore of the Sea, the great weight that we have and the observation of what's going on in the sea from the beach, which, by the way, I've done in Aldborough at that beach.
Wow.
And in the Hamptons here every summer, in Montauk, these great places. When we have this distance that we're viewing from where we are. I grew up in Coney Island, of all places, with my grandmother. And then the beaches of Long Island all the way out to Montauk, summer after summer. And then to go to Aldborough and see the North Sea and so forth, thrilling. This is my world. And then in Ireland, same. So, what do we do when we get to the beach and we look out, whether it's a sand beach or a pink coral in Bermuda or wherever you say,
Yeah.
We gaze and then we contemplate. And sometimes we say, how beautiful, and then sometimes we just sit back and we pause in our reverie. One interesting thought about the sea. We have a home in Moab, Utah, which is surrounded by the red rock and the infinite sea of ancient times, because Utah was covered in an inland sea during dinosaur period. People don't realize that. So all this sand, when you go through the desert, it's the same sand that's on the beach in Montauk. It's fascinating.
That's amazing, isn't it?
And there are dinosaur tracks and all that stuff, and the red rock. It's gorgeous. So, and you have this view of the ocean that's infinite by looking at the desert from up high.
Right.
So it's taught me a few things, as far as the reverie we just spoke about. In the reverie, what do we find? We find worship of the nature of nature. We find worship of life, because the sea is full of life. One little story. We rented a place out in Amagansett, which is just before Montauk, out on Long Island, in November. Very quiet, a condo on the beach for a week.
Nice.
And we're walking on the beach, and we look out and we see whales.
Wow.
Humpback whales. I've never seen them with the black back, black and white, and they're going up in the air and coming down, and the spouts of spewing. There was a school of them. I'm going out there 30-odd years. I'd never seen whales before. I've seen not even dolphins, but a school of whales. So there you go.
Yeah.
Isn't that the most wonderful thing?
Yeah. And there is something mesmerizing, and it brings sort of peace to your soul, doesn't it? Where that moment when you're standing on a beach or on a cliff top looking out at the sea, and there's something, I think there is something about perspective, about our how insignificant we are, but also how tied we are to nature.
Bravo. That's the whole point of At the Shore of the Sea, my violin concerto. It's very much tied to these observations, and the sounds of the piece throughout are tied to that infinite quality that we seek when we're there. Right. And becomes a very calming thing. That's why it's not just I want to get a good suntan, No. I want to experience it. And that's what's so wonderful about the beaches. I remember as a little boy going down to Florida, where we went every summer to see my grandparents in the Miami Beach area, and going out just about 100 yards, you could stand even as a little boy. And a school of fish, little tiny, little fish came right through our bodies and pounded us. They kept on going. I'll never forget that feeling. Boy, I didn't tell them to do that. They were there.
Right.
And there I was, a little boy, and I'm reminded of it, all the time when we go out in the ocean. And the great thing about living on the seashore here, we have this wonderful Atlantic seashore. The Pacific is a different feeling, but here, it's very much tied to nature. It's the most magnificent feeling.
Yeah.
So I try to portray that, not literally, ever literally, but the vision and the sense of the sun and the water and the salt and the sand and the nature and obviously the fish
Right.
and those wonderful giant mammals, those whales. My God, there we are. And
Okay.
it's in the violin concerto, and that's why I chose the title At the Shore of the Sea.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I can't wait to hear that as well. So
Me
how
too.
exciting. That's amazing. And also I really love on the piece variations the way you can hear the theme. You could in the variations, they are variations, they're not just separate pieces.
Let's talk about that very quickly,
Yeah.
about how that's structured. I'm not any different from Beethoven or Mozart, who took known themes, but they didn't compose necessarily. I mean, there's exceptions, but if you look at, there's a wonderful Britannia variations of Beethoven, early one, bum, 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 which
Yeah.
is in a Beethoven piano variations, which I've played many times. So we take themes that have in them, and here's the key, that they can be varied.
Yeah.
Not all themes can be varied. If you ask me to take Nessun Dorma from Turandot of Puccini and make variations out of it, I'd say, wrong piece. It's in itself, it has enough. But there are some themes that call for variation. Like some poems can be set to music, but don't ever try to do a lot of Shakespeare to music, because there's already music in the words.
Right.
So it's quite interesting. I heard in this theme of, in the piece variations, this Shalom Aleichem, peace be unto you theme, the ability to mutate it in all kinds of ways. And then the extra added attraction was I happened to be working with one of the top violin virtuosos in the world.
Yeah.
He's one of the great ones, top 5, top 2, top 1. He's amazing. In my book, I can just mention a few others who I adore as well.
Right.
But he's fundamental in my life. So it's quite easy to write the variations for me. And then he edited them and he changed things, which I was just delighted about.
Because I suppose actually he knows the violin better than you do.
Right. And
So
it
yeah.
depends. When I write vocal music or anything, Verdi changed things all the time for his performers. Brahms, when he wrote the violin concerto, he sought out Joseph Joachim, his friend from childhood, who's the greatest violinist of that period after, Paganini.
Yeah.
And Joachim said, you should do this or do that. And Brahms listened to him. Why not?
Yeah.
It's a collaboration. So all 3 of my pieces for Tim, my piece variations, my second violin and piano sonata, which is recorded with Stephen Beck, also Philharmonic, and then this new piece, which will be recorded on Naxos, Scott willing, At the Shore of the Sea, my violin concerto. They will all be edited, all have been or will be edited by Tim. And he's on the cover of the published version. It says Tim Fain, editor. I'm blessed to have this kind of relationship. And I'm blessed to talk to you. It's just fabulous to be together today.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I keep saying this. One of Max's colleagues at Crossover is Amanda, and she's the one who got me started, because I said to her, I want to do a podcast, but I don't really know how to start. And she went, right, this is what, do this, get this, sort this. And I think that kind of gracious help, we all get it along the way. And it's opened this world to me of
Wonderful.
Talking to people like you. I'd never have had that opportunity before. And it is
I understand.
Amazing. So
it's a great thing. Well, thank you for having me on Harmonious World. I'm happy to be with you.
Thank you so much. And we will speak again, no doubt.
Looking forward to it. Let's get life back in the UK the continent and the United States. And then we have to work on the rest of the world, get that vaccine out to everyone.
Absolutely. And I really genuinely look forward to being able to do this in person. And
Wouldn't that be nice?
It'll be amazing.
I love having dinner.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you so much, Hillary.
That was another fascinating conversation with Michael Shapiro. It's such an honor to talk to people like that who have so much to offer and who are giving so much to the music of the 21st century. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Please do subscribe to Harmonious World. It would be so nice to know that people are subscribing, and do leave a review as well. I'm so grateful to all of my listeners. So thank you very much. You know who you are. And please do find me on social media or leave a review. Let me know what you're enjoying. I have some amazing interviews lined up for the coming weeks. So I think you're going to enjoy them. Thanks for joining me once again on Harmonious World. See you soon. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.